Hi, good evening. Today I'd like to reflect with you on the first reading from Wednesday of the 6th week of Easter. Actually, I'll expand it a little bit because the lectionary omits some verses from Acts chapter 17. Really, we're going to read through the first verse of the 18th chapter. So we're going to go from Acts 17:16 through 18:1. After Paul's escorts had taken him to Athens, they came away with instructions for Silas and Timothy to join him as soon as possible. While Paul was waiting for them in Athens, he became quite annoyed at the sight of idols everywhere in the city. In the synagogue, he used to hold discussions with the Jews and their Gentile worshippers, and every day in the public square with ordinary passerby. Some of the Epicurean and Stoic philosophers would confer with him, and some of them would ask, "What would this chatterer be trying to say to us?" Others commented, "He seems to be lobbying for foreign deities because he was preaching about Jesus and the resurrection." So they took him and led him to the Areopagus with the request, "May we know what this new teaching is that is being proposed by you? You are bringing up subjects unfamiliar to our ears, and so we want to know what this is all about." Now all Athenians, as well as the aliens residing with them, used to spend their time in nothing else but telling about or listening to something new. Then Paul rose in the meeting of the Areopagus and said, "People of Athens, I see that you are in every respect religiously exact. For as I walked about and looked carefully at your objects of worship, I even came upon an altar inscribed to an unknown God. What therefore you unknowingly worship, I proclaim to you, the God who made the world and all that is in it, the Lord of heaven and earth, does not dwell in sanctuaries made by human hands, nor is he served by human hands because he needs anything. Rather, it is he who gives to everyone life and breath and everything. He made from one the whole human race to dwell on the entire surface of the earth, and he fixed the ordered seasons and the boundaries of their regions, so that the people might seek God, even perhaps grope for him and find him, though indeed he is not far from any one of us. For in him we live and move and have our being, as even some of your poets have said, for we too are his offspring. Since therefore we are the offspring of God, we ought not to think that the divinity is like an image fashioned from gold, silver, or stone by human art and imagination. God has overlooked the times of ignorance, but now he demands that all people everywhere repent, because he has established a day on which he will judge the world with justice through a man he has appointed, and he has provided confirmation for all by raising him from the dead." When they heard about resurrection of the dead, some began to scoff, but others said, "We should like to hear you some other time." And so Paul left them. But some did join him and became believers. Among them were Dionysius, a member of the court of the Areopagus, a woman named Damaris, and others with them. After this, he left Athens and went to Corinth. The word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. Here we see St. Paul at his best as a missionary. This is perhaps one of the most important speeches in Acts by St. Paul. Here he is at the Areopagus. He is a true missionary sent forth. So he went to the Greeks, to Athens, and there he found them to be a very religious people, but he was annoyed because they were worshiping idols, he being a pious Jew, of course. And so he began to interact with them. He began a dialogue with them, with Stoic and Epicurean philosophers. Paul wanted to appeal to the Greeks, especially to their reason. In this long discourse, he first acknowledged their religiosity. He took them up on their offer to speak at the Areopagus. He acknowledged their religiosity. He could see what was good in them. They truly were striving to know something about God. He also pointed out what was good in their culture. They had a shrine to the different gods and even an altar to the unknown God, which he said, this is the God of Jesus Christ. What you therefore unknowingly worship, I proclaim to you. He then appeals to God through creation. He appeals to the reason of the Greeks, because certainly the Greeks could observe things in nature. And he said that these things in nature, every life, everything that lives and breathes upon the earth, the whole human race, the boundaries of the seas and the ordering of the seasons, all of this points to God. God made them all, and he made them so that we might ask a question. Who made them? We might then begin to seek God. And so he acknowledged the goodness of the Greeks in their religiosity, in their culture, and in their building of this shrine. But then he said you have to turn from idols and these false gods to the true God who made heaven and earth, who made the entire human race. This God is not far from us. He made us all one, part of one race. That is, we have a closeness, a kinship with one another in our human nature. But then he also said this God isn't far off. Many people seek God, and perhaps they grope for him and even find him. But he's not the God who's far off. Actually, God is with us. He is near. And in the person of Jesus Christ, he became one of us. The Word was made flesh and made his dwelling among us. Indeed, Jesus is the image of the invisible God. And through him we have access to the Father. He's not far from us. In him we live and move and have our being. Rather than appeal to the Old Testament, with which the Greeks would be largely unfamiliar, Paul appeals to even Greek poetry. And he says, your poets say, we too are his offspring. But Paul wants to say, you too can be offspring of a new birth and have one God and Father of us all as your Father and Jesus Christ as your brother. And so he invites them to faith. Paul is a missionary. He goes where the gospel has not been preached. He tries to persuade by appealing to what's good in the people and what's good in the culture, their religiosity, their use of reason, their high philosophy, their poetry. But he wants to bring the gospel to that culture. He wants to propose the gospel of Jesus Christ and the person of Jesus Christ to that culture, to take what is good from the culture and purify it with the gospel values, without destroying what the people, in fact, have in their culture. He's doing what the church today calls inculturation, trying to bring out the best from the culture while still proposing the faith. But the gospel in itself has to be proposed. We can't just kind of become worldly and adopt the values of the culture, all of the values of the culture, because not all of them are compatible with the gospel. But in proclaiming Jesus Christ, we also have to talk about Jesus' death and resurrection. Elsewhere, Paul will say the cross is a stumbling block to the Greeks. And it confounds them utterly. And when Paul speaks about the resurrection, they scoff, they sneer at him. And they give him some people give him some polite talk. Oh, well, we'd like to hear about this from you some other time. But they do not come to faith. But Paul, in this regard, is a model missionary for us because he proposes. He does not impose. And he is not broken by the fact that he has not been successful. Because every missionary has his mission, and he must be faithful to that mission. And he must be faithful to the one who sent him, even in the face of seemingly poor results. True success is not measured by the number of converts. True success is measured by our fidelity to the Lord and persevering even under trying circumstances, even in the midst of failure. Thus, Paul left Athens, but a few came to faith, Dionysius, Damaris, and some others with them. And then Paul would go off to Corinth and would found a church there. Corinth was a big port city with a temple to Aphrodite, with more than 1,000 temple prostitutes. But Paul still preached even there. We too must preach in the darkness of this secularized culture. We must appeal to people's reason, to philosophy, to science. But the gospel is attractive. It is a way of life. And the person of Jesus Christ is also attractive. He is truth, goodness, and beauty itself. And who would not want to follow him? Indeed, let us follow the example of St. Paul in being missionary disciples. And even in the face of a lack of numerical success, let us be at least successful in fidelity to our baptism, in fidelity to our mission. May God bless you all.